I'm guaranteed where it'll stop, so.
Right.
So we are live, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let's call to order the Historic Resource Preservation Board regular meeting, Wednesday, September 13th, 2023. Swearing in of members.
And I have everything ready except for the one change, but I.
That's okay.
So, 1 second. I'm gonna ask the three of you to stand. And you'll just repeat, you don't have to repeat after me, but when I get to the end, if you just,
Kind of like getting married, you just say I do at the end.
you know, you go with I will or something. That's fine. If not, I'm gonna leave my copies. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm that you will support, protect, and defend the Constitution and the government of the United States and the state of Florida against all enemies, domestic or foreign, and that you will bear true faith, loyalty, and allegiance to the same, and that you're entitled to hold office under the Constitution and the Charter of the City of Lake Worth Beach, and that you will faithfully perform all the duties of the office of appointed member of the Historic Resources Preservation Board, of which you're about to enter?
I do.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And then if you just sign your name and put your name.
And Sherry, roll call, please.
Sure. Elaine DeRisso.
Hi.
Laura Devlin. Here. Bob Dorenza.
Here.
Jamie Foreman. Nadine Heights. Here. Ed DeVoe.
Here.
Ed LeBlanc. You have a quorum.
Okay. Recording and pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any additions, deletions, reordering, and approval of the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have board training that we will be moving to the top of the agenda.
Okay. And can we get approval of the minutes? If we had there's only two of us that were there for the formal minutes, we can still do that. Okay, could I get a motion to approve the minutes from the June 14th, 2023 meeting?
Yeah, motion to approve.
I need someone to say second.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and I need an approval of the minutes for the July 12th, 23 regular meeting.
Motion to approve. Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now may the training begin.
Awesome. Let me check.
Oh, we're gonna have to do it. I can't brainwave it. I'm sorry.
You got it.
Sorry, I had a lot of caffeine before the meeting. We're excited to be here tonight, and we're excited to get you started in the training. For this first training this evening, we're going to walk you through the historic preservation component. You all have a lot of responsibility as a board. You do all the same things that the planning and zoning board does, but you for the historic areas, but you also do architectural review. And so we're going to get you started understanding the architectural review process, the documents that we use, the regulations and requirements. Then we have the city attorney who's going to talk about sunshine law, about ethics, and those kind of things. And special that way, if you have any questions when we get most of the board questions typically come in Elizabeth's presentation about interactions and discussions and operating in the sunshine. And then next month, we're going to do another training on zoning. So.
All right. So we are going to start with zooming through 150 years of preservation. So some quick highlights of preservation in the US in particular. So a lot of people trace it to the Mount Vernon Ladies Association as the first national preservation organization in the US back in 1853. They've served as a model for a lot of preservation grassroots work in the US. And Mount Vernon is still owned and operated by the same organization that originally saved it back in the 1850s. So we've also got kind of in the zoning side, Charleston had the first zoning ordinance in the country back in 1931. And part of the reason it's important for historic is that it regulated the development on the peninsula to respect their historic structures. So moving over to New York, Penn Station is another big turning point for US preservation. So the Pennsylvania Railroad wanted to demolish Penn Station and replace it with Madison Square Garden. When this became public in 1961, there was, international outrage and protests, but there were no lawful protections of historic structures at the time. So it did get demolished in 1963. But that controversy prompted the mayor to create the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission in 1965. And that was one of the first preservation commissions, much like you guys are now. Another one in New York City Grand Central Terminal, same railroad company wanted to add a tower on top of, you can see on that top right, that's Grand Central Terminal. This was the tower they wanted to add on top of it. The Landmarks Commission denied their COA, I think for kind of obvious reasons. It would have totally overpowered the historic structure. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. In 1978, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the landmark law, saying that designation is historic and requiring architectural compatibility does not prevent reasonable return on investments, and it's not a government taking of property. So that was a huge landmark in allowing us to protect our structures. So then we kept moving through time. Urban renewal was a mixed bag for historic preservations, really working with some good intentions to try to clean up some struggling urban cores, but a lot of times that ended up destroying some of that unique historic fabric of our cities, letting interstates cut through, displacing core communities. So here we've got downtown Denver, kind of a before and after. So as happens a lot in preservation, we have kind of a crisis situation and we come up with a response. So our federal government recognized, the need for some national apparatus for preservation and some national guidelines. And that came in the 1966 National Historic Preservation Act. And that's the framework we still use today on the national level. So it gave each state a historic preservation office, created a President's Advisory Council, created our national register, and created some processes for review of federal projects as well. So getting through kind of our regulatory structure that we live in. So on the federal level, we've got that advisory council that advises the president and Congress. We've also got the Department of Interior and the National Park Service that work together to create standards and guidelines and preservation briefs. They monitor federal historic sites, and they're kind of the highest level that we go to as preservationists. So like I said, each state also has their own office. So in Florida, we've got the Florida Division of Historical Resources. So they set our state policy, they keep our state register, and they advise us as counties and cities through our certified local government program. So we are a CLG. That essentially means that the state has accredited our historic preservation program. So they review all of our board meetings and our decisions, all our minutes go to them. They review and comment on any proposed changes to our preservation ordinance. And this also allows us to get certain grants and gives us the ability to offer historic waivers, get technical assistance, and gives us the authority to do some county and local tax exemptions as well.
And I just want to add that the certified local government program that we're a part of, how many are there in the state? There's like a lot. There are a lot, and it's not an immense. It's like 30 or 40. It's not,
Yeah.
It's not as many. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is a serious business to be a CLG.
And that's counties and municipalities combined.
True.
As well.
So, and one of the advantages, because we are a coastal community, the only way that you can get a base flood elevation variance is if you are a contributing historic structure. So if you, depending on the addition or the level of renovation that you do, if you are not a contributing historic structure, you may have to demolish your house and raise it to the new base flood elevation. The only way that you get that variance is if you are a contributing structure in a historic district in a certified local government. All those things have to happen together. So we have processed a lot of these base flood elevation variances for people who are doing substantial improvements to homes and want to do an addition with a substantial improvement to the home. We've done several. The other thing is the historic waiver process. As part of the certified local government, we offer something that's less than a variance. Has a lower threshold of review. And again, it's only for certified or
Certified local government.
certified local governments and for contributing properties that the waiver is that you're eligible to grant a waiver. So there's some very special things that happen because we are a certified local government. But with that comes additional scrutiny of our program and of your decisions by the state of Florida. So it's just important to understand how important that to us. And then it also allows us to get access to additional monies. Now we have had grants for survey grants, and we've also had grants for scanning and digital documentation of our property files and some other activities. And we're hoping to pursue more grant opportunities in the future. And again, because we have that CLG status, that gives us access to grants that we would not otherwise have.
Awesome.
What total?
Hmm?
What total amount so far?
I do not recall those numbers. I know they were do you remember the last grant? It was at least, I think, $10,000 or $20,000 for digital documentation. So it wasn't an insignificant amount of money. It was something that we would not have been able to afford to do had it not been for the grant. So, and surveys are not cheap and other, so.
Our design guidelines used a grant to be created.
And that was, I think, though, usually the design guidelines, I think projects like that usually run a local governments for that type of planning effort around $150,000 for a consultant.
Awesome. So one more thing on this slide. So we've gotten through federal, state, and then local. One of the biggest misconceptions in preservation is that being on the National Register is what gives you teeth. The real protections of preservation in the US come at the local level through our local ordinances. So here we do have some extra protection for our National Register listed resources. That's only because we wrote it into our code. So this is where we prevent, demolitions or incompatible alterations. And this is also where we have our local tax exemption program.
And again, that tax exemption is only available if you're contributing in the district.
Mm-hmm. So kind of the process of historic designation and a little bit of history of preservation in Lake Worth Beach. So the Historic Commission was created here in the 1990s, and most of our districts were surveyed in the late 90s and early 2000s, and each was adopted by an ordinance. So within these designations, we've got contributing properties and non-contributing properties. So contributing properties means typically it is within the district's period of significance, and it exhibits certain architectural types and retains its character defining features. So it's still a good example of its style and of our history. Non-contributing resources are usually outside the period of significance, so built in 1995 or something. Or they've been severely altered or had incompatible additions, so they are no longer a good resource to be able to tell their original story anymore. So we've also got lots of buildings outside our historic districts that could potentially be evaluated for designation, but without that designation, we can't protect them. So that's kind of our importance of designation here. We've got criteria both from the national level and the local level.
But before we go on, let's talk about most of the structures in our historic districts are single family homes. In the state of Florida, the only time that a city can conduct architectural review is if a structure is in a historic district of a single family home, not multi-family or commercial buildings. So otherwise that goes straight to permit. And if it complies with the zoning, the city has to issue the permit. So a lot of structures that were built in Parrot Cove that you drive down, maybe Ocean or some of those other ones, it's hard to notice the new from the old because they really blend very nicely. They have good character. They fit in with the district as whole. I will tell you that those homes did not look like that when they first submitted to city. So that was all of those homes being in character with that Parrot Cove area came as a result of the review of the historic board.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin. So we've got criteria. So we try to be, as evidence-based as possible. It's not just that something is old. We need significance and integrity for a designation. So the National Register criteria, those ones listed there, we basically sum them up as A is for events, criterion B is for people, criterion C is architecture, design, and construction, and criterion D is archaeology. So our districts are largely adopted through criterion C for architecture and design. So our districts, their purpose isn't to protect any one single structure. They are mostly modest structures, local cottages and things like that. But when they're all placed together in a community setting in that district, they embody certain distinctive characteristics of planning in South Florida. So we've got some great recognizable, representations of architecture, and these together tell the story of how our city was planned, how it was developed, and why it developed the way it did. So we're really looking to preserve the structures themselves, but also the feeling, the setting, and the design of the city. So we've got our local ordinance in section 23.5-4 of our land development regulations. So this is what protects our sites at the local level. So ordinances are generally based on the Secretary of Interior standards, which is a national level document, and they're integrated into our land development regulations, which is the same spot you find our zoning code. So the ordinance is going to tell you about the Hrpb and all of your responsibilities and all of our responsibilities as staff, what our community's goals are for preservation, what's protected and how it's protected, and the review criteria that we all use in our decision making. So you'll see that a lot in your staff reports, us citing, section 23.5-4K. This is where our criteria are. This is how we're analyzing it. So we've also got design guidelines that are city specific, developed by us for us, for the specific preservation of our unique resources. So these are in full force and effect, same as the ordinance, and they hold as much weight as our other land development regulations. So you'll see the design guidelines a lot in our staff reports as well. So that's on that top left. That's one of our supplementary document. We've also got some major thoroughfare design guidelines. Those are specifically for things like downtown, Federal Highway, Dixie. So they often apply outside our historic districts. Your friends in the PZB will see those a lot as well. But we do have some major thoroughfares, Lake and Lucerne, that run through our historic districts, helping developers usually try to implement creativity in their design while fitting into our existing major development areas. We've also got our educational guidelines. These are not regulatory, but they're there to provide our property owners with guidance for sustainability, resiliency. Like Erin mentioned, flood zones on a coastal city are a huge deal for us. And then we also have our surveys.
These are really, we do not review them again for compliance. This is a handout. Hey, I'd like to learn more about reducing my energy bill. Where would I plant my tree? Where would I, you can go there and it's just guidance for sustainable and it's free to use and look at it and take it or leave it. We do not review against it.
Okay, so Erin mentioned kind of at the beginning, you all have a lot of responsibilities and a lot of factors to your decision making. So we've kind of organized it into these three hats. Let me scoot this video so you can see our third hat there. So preservation hat, primarily doing design review for COAs. So exterior alterations, a roof replacement, a window replacement, new construction, additions. And this is also where we're wearing that hat for historic waivers and Florida Building Code variances for base flood elevation typically. So those two are the same one that we've got for our building hat, those waivers and variances. to the building code. And then our zoning cap over here is reviewing as the zoning board for all of our parcels within our historic districts. So things like building lot coverage or setbacks for a new construction, variances when a historic waiver is not the appropriate thing to use, or for larger development projects, say a larger apartment complex, things like planned developments, major site plans, conditional use permits, all of those things will be part of your review. And we'll dive into those a little more at the next meeting when we go really zoning specific.
I just will add that your zoning hat is also then further divided into two other roles. One is an advisory role where you provide a recommendation for certain application types to the city commission. And then the other one where you are the final decision-making body for several types of zoning applications. These include conditional uses and site plans. Plan developments, any type of legislation, amendments to the comp plan or LDR amendments, you'll provide a recommendation. Both you and the planning and zoning board will review and each provide your own recommendation on any LDR amendments.
Awesome. So with that, it's Elizabeth's turn to hop in.
Yay. So do you need a stretch, like just clap a little bit, do this, take it off. We got the attorney now.
Thanks for volunteering. Here to tell you about all the consequences of you volunteering if they haven't scared you off yet. So I have been asked to talk about meeting procedures that will impact you as a board, and also those basic things that come along with any government volunteer job, which is sunshine, public records, and ethics. So what you see is kind of on the screen is a basic shortcut of what your agenda looks like. And that big component in red is the public hearings. And so what happens when you all get to public hearings, what you need to be considering, and those are whether or not you have disclosures to make, how your hearings run, because some of your decisions are legislative and some of them are quasi-judicial, and quasi-judicial procedures have a different standard, they have a different process, and there are different things allowed. So I want to touch on those because they are a little wonky. How you make motions, how the meetings typically just kind of run in general when you're hearing and in that public hearing setting and making motions, and then the requirement for public comment, because this is a statutory requirement in Florida. All right, so board disclosures. There are two different types of disclosures that you will be responsible for as board members. One is ethical disclosures. So the state and Palm Beach County both have regulations for ethics of government officials, and you all are considered public officials for your role in this board. And so those ethical requirements do apply to you, and sometimes they come in the form of voting conflicts of interest. So if you recognize that you have a voting conflict of interest in advance or in the moment, it's your responsibility to declare it. And then there are some procedures that we'll get into. There are also quasi-judicial disclosures. So there's ex parte communication, which is an issue in quasi-judicial proceedings. And if you have those, you have to disclose them, and we'll get into that as well. All right, so I'm going to start off hot and heavy with the ethics issues. So this is the state, like I said, the state has ethical requirements, and so does Palm Beach County, because Palm Beach County is the closer government to you. Their regulations are more strict, and so those are the ones we typically follow. So all of the things I'm going to be presenting to you tonight are
Do we want next?
Are from the Palm Beach County Code of Ethics. So under the Palm Beach County Code of Ethics, you are not allowed as a public officer to use your position in making or failing to make decisions that will benefit yourself or other people who are particular to you in your relationships. So we'll go over who those people are. If you have, if you know that this, like, for example, if the House or property that's coming before you, if that property is across the street from where you live. That is a voting conflict of interest, okay? Because the way that the state and the code of the Palm Beach County Code of, or Ethics Commission rule on conflicts of interest is if it will benefit you or one of these people related to in a particular way, more so than the general community. And when they say more so, they mean, is it you and less than 100 other people? Okay, so if you live on a short street and that house is on your street, probably going to be a conflict of interest for you if it's even on the same street. If it's, 12 blocks away and it's going to impact you and everybody in the next 12 blocks, probably not. Okay, so that's kind of the scheme of things that you're looking at. Will this impact me or one of these other related people and 100 or more people or 101 people? And that's your criterion for looking at a voting conflict of interest. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, this is the list of all those people. It's quite a lot. There are specific relationships, so your spouse, domestic partner, siblings, grandparents, step parents, nieces and nephews, aunts and uncles. But it also includes your employer, a client, another type of business associate, a creditor or debtor, and civic organizations if you are an officer or director. And it includes not just you, but also your spouse or domestic partner. If they have any of those relationships, then it broadens out to that round, circle too. Okay, so be aware of those relationships.
I think though, what we did talk about was that if somebody, let's say a contractor worked on your house one time, but they're not currently working on your house and they bring an application forward, you can still vote on that application as long as you're not currently under contract with that, that contractor is not currently working on your house.
Right, but you should disclose that that
You should disclose
That
that one time this guy
relationship, right.
did work at your house, but that
doesn't affect your decision.
it does not affect your, and Elizabeth has a whole speech you have to make.
I do.
Uh-oh.
It's like a whole disclosure that you have to do.
Okay.
So when you have a voting conflict of interest, you have to disclose on the record that you have a voting conflict of interest. You have to disclose whether the interest is for you or one of those other list of people or more than just one person. It can be me and my spouse, right? And there's a form you have to fill out that goes to Sherry and she will help you submit it to the County Commission on Ethics and she'll keep a copy for you.
So it's not as easy as just
Not just-
choosing yourself and stepping
No.
out of the room.
No, so usually if you have a conflict of interest, we also will ask you to step out of the room because Palm Beach County's rules say not only can you not vote on the issue, but you cannot participate in the discussion on the issue. You cannot influence your fellow board members on the issue at all. So you can't wink at them, you can't nudge them, you can't give them head nods and whatnot. So it's just cleaner if you leave the room, right? So that way there's no question that they were not influenced by your.
And all of these procedures and rules are designed to protect you. So we
Yes.
want to protect our volunteers. We don't want there to be even the appearance of a conflict. And if you're unsure if you have a conflict, this is the lady.
Absolutely.
We will put you in touch with her.
I vote.
All right, so. In addition to the ethical disclosures for voting conflicts of interest, there are also these quasi judicial disclosures, which are different, right? So in quasi judicial proceedings, you are the fair and impartial decision maker. You are basically the judge in a courtroom. Okay, you're hearing the facts that are presented to you and you're making a decision based on the evidence that is presented. The evidence rules aren't quite so strict. It's a little less formal of a proceeding, but that's the general idea. So you'll see up on the screen, we talk about, how those decisions have to be made. There has to be competent and substantial evidence. When staff is putting together your agendas, they give you a staff report. The staff report has competent and substantial evidence, and it provides a recommendation for you. So if you accept staff's analysis and recommendation, you can move forward. If you think something different than what staff has presented, or if you think additional things have come up in the hearing process that need to be part of the record, you can make that and put that evidence as part of your motion. Okay, and we'll talk about motion making in a bit.
I'll just say before she gets started, please read your staff reports. Like if you can't commit to the whole thing, the first 2 pages are really solid and they give a nice summary of what's happening. If you can commit to the first 2 pages and then the conclusion, like if you're busy, I get it. I was on a volunteer board. That will help you a lot understand what the issue is before you and what the exact question that folks are asking. And I do want to hit when Elizabeth talked about arbitrary, your decision-making cannot be arbitrary. It has to be based on a consistent application of the law, and it can't be contrary to law. So you can't say, okay, well, the zoning requirements are this, but we really like this guy. So we're going to be like, hey, we're not going to apply the zoning rules
I
to
think
you.
this house is really pretty.
This house is pretty. We're not going to apply the design regulations because we think it's pretty, right? So you guys aren't the pretty committee. You're the architectural integrity committee, the architectural consistency committee. You are an LPA, or local planning agency, which is a statutory designation. And so you have a legislative and an important quasi judicial role, and all of your stuff has to be consistent with the law. If we're going to approve something that does not meet our LDRs, then it needs a variance or a waiver to that section of the LDRs, because you cannot do an approval that is contrary to law or arbitrarily apply the law.
Right, it's a lot of people realize that.
Right. So as part of your quasi judicial procedures, like I said, you're that fair and impartial decision maker. So if you have a demonstrated bias or prejudice against a party, for or against, okay? If you have a direct or indirect monetary interest in the outcome of the hearing, if you have a prejudgment of the issues of the hearing, if you've made comments for or against the project on social media, that counts. If you have any ex parte communication, so ex parte communication is that you have gone outside of the bounds of what is presented to you in the hearing room and during the hearing procedures. You went and took a tour of the property. You spoke with the applicant. You spoke with people in the field who have a strong opinion on the project. Those are types of things that you have to disclose to say, I had this communication outside of what's being presented here. If it's beneficial to your fellow board members, if you've had those communications, to share with them what they were, so you're all on the same page. Because those conversations and investigations are held outside of the meeting room, they are considered ex parte communication and prejudicial to the proceedings. You disclosing them, the city has adopted ordinance that says, but if our people disclose that they had these communications, who they had them with and what they were about, it removes the prejudice. Okay, so it makes it kind of okay that you had it. But the applicant can always object and has an opportunity to counter your decisions if you are shown to still have a prejudice. Which is why if you say yes to any of those things, then we follow up with, even though you had those communications, even though you did those other things, can you still be a fair and impartial, unbiased decision maker today? Okay, so that's the final question of all of that is, can you fulfill your job duty? Yes.
So if something is coming up and you wanna look at it for yourself, you should not do that.
Correct.
Good question.
Yes.
It's just a small town and people
Yes.
bump into you
Yes.
all the time and they want to in your ear over things. And this happened to me when nothing is filed, it's going to be a project. How does that factor in to this as well? And also too, there was another issue I had, and that is, I'll think of it, but that's the big one. I mean, it's not pending right now.
That's
Right.
the biggest one for everybody.
That is the
Yeah,
biggest one. So my recommendation to you is that I have not found anything that says that there is a start or stop to when that ex parte communication is important. So if it comes up, say, 2 years ago, I spoke with the applicant about this project before it was even, a thing, but that said, this is what we talked about, and I can be impartial if that is, the
And if
facts.
you don't recall, like, you talked to a couple people and they approached you downtown when you were getting your mail, just be like, I don't remember who I specifically, but I know a couple people bumped into me. This is my best recollection. Most of the time, conversations in a small town, you disclose them, it's fine, because it's just, but
If you have written communications, like if people send you an email or text message or social media post or whatever, you want to send those to Sherry. Because that has to become part of the record, anything written.
I mean, when we get bigger ones, situations in front of us, and we have like, say, West Blackman, to call to explain a little more before a meeting, as long as we disclose that at the meeting, that
Yes.
goes to the planner involved with that. Okay.
Yes,
and to that point, because an applicant calls you, it is up to you whether you return that call or not.
And
So,
you get the call, yeah.
so you will get the calls, okay, for sure. And it's whatever your level of comfort is.
you don't want to have to make the disclosure, don't answer that call.
Yeah,
That's
If you-
right.
yeah. There's no obligation because somebody calls you,
I don't.
you don't have to talk to them.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not,
Can you do a drive-by?
Oh, yeah, I do. I
So,
drive by.
but if you drive by to investigate,
Not stopping, just.
if
I mean-
you drive by to investigate,
If the property,
Not have the conversation.
If- no, the property before you is between your home and your work, and you drive past that property every day, no disclosure. I drive past that property every day as part of my route, nothing particular to that.
but
If you specifically drive by the property to check it out, you should disclose it.
We disclose it. I mean, we've had
Yeah.
board members that said, I've spent ample time walking around that property, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, as long as you disclose. it.
Yes. Always err on the side of disclosure. That's where you are the most protected.
But you're saying don't do that, don't spend ample time.
But you know it as long as you disclose it.
you can't.
It's your preference whether you want to be responsible for making the disclosures and sharing the information, or if you just want to stay out of it.
But if you investigate too much, just know the applicant has the right to object to your independent investigations.
Right.
So we can pull up though, we have Google Map, we have access to
Sure.
all of the imagery we
If
have.
you like to look at Google Maps when you're looking at property, say, could you please pull up Google Maps, and we'll pull it up for everybody.
You can bring your computer to look at the agenda packet, but do not pull up independent websites during discussion. Only look at what is given to you, because you can only consider, it's like in court, right? So there's disclosure. So whatever the applicant sees that they have to know what you see based on your decision. So you can't look up or do other things that they're not advised at, right? And the same with staff. Going back to social media, let's though hit this a little hard is why it's later. Oh, it's later. Anxiety, you guys can get we want you to stay out of trouble.
All right. Okay, so, ex parte communications, we've just talked a lot about that, and that's what the disclosures are really intended to accommodate for. So if you have these things, and we've really kind of thrown it out there, and gone over it all, so I think we can skip that one. Okay. Okay, so motions, once you have heard the presentation, you've made your disclosures, you've gotten all the evidence, then what do you do with all that information? You make a motion so that everybody can move on with the day, right? So, in boards, some of you have probably served on boards, some of you may not have. They're a little interesting in how it all works, right? So you have a chair, the chair runs the meeting, the chair will sometimes call for a motion. If you feel as a board member, you have heard enough, you know what your decision is going to be, it's clear to you, you can offer a motion. Wait, whenever you're speaking in a board, particularly when you're going through the motion process, always wait to be recognized by the chair. It helps the clerk keep better minutes. It makes the whole thing really clear, okay? So you can offer a motion, staff writes you really nice recommended motions to approve or to deny. So you can follow those. If you want to mix it up, like I said before, if you don't think that they put all of the stuff in there you want to consider, if you want to change one or more of the conditions that have been offered, including adding some or deleting some. If you think that their recommendation was all wrong and it really should go another way, and you have to add more evidence and factors into your motion. So we will help you through all of those differences. Most of the time, what I have
Even if
seen-
you disagree with us, it's okay.
Right.
We're here to get through the process. So if you don't agree with staff's motion and you're trying to do a motion, we will help you.
Yeah.
We will help you with the motion.
I think
okay?
it is unusual to get through a full meeting with no changes to motions. Because there's, at least with the conditions, there's usually a tweak, you know? So once the motion has been made, then you need a second. The chairs really should be, I have a motion from so-and-so, okay, I have a second from so-and-so, and then you can discuss the motion if you want to, or you can just vote. All your voting has to be done verbally. The chair will recognize whether the vote is unanimous or if certain people dissented in the motion. And you have to do all your motions verbally because Florida doesn't allow for secret voting. So you do it all verbal, and that's the quickest and the easiest, least painful way. All right. Okay, so that's more, so you all have quorum requirements. So that are higher than this, so it doesn't really impact you, but there are certain things in the city's code that require at least 3 affirmative votes. Okay, so if you have your quorum to get your majority vote to pass a motion, you're going to hit the 3 anyway, so that's not going to be an issue. All right, public comment is required by Florida law before you take final action on an issue. Typically, in your meetings, you have a place in your agenda for public comment that's on any issue that is historic preservation related. And you have also a call out that's not on your agenda, where at the end of each presentation or each agenda item, you'll ask if there's public comment. That's to make sure that in compliance with Florida law, before the decision is made, the public has been given the opportunity to comment on that item. And that keeps it clean again for the record, that for this item, the public was given that opportunity.
Well, I have a question. I see that it's limited to 3 minutes per person. We've had
You
situations
want-
where people
yeah.
go, what's the most appropriate way to, we often will let somebody go on because out of respect for them coming up to the mic and
Right.
presenting their opinion, but at some point, we've had to say, I'm sorry, your time is up. What's the most appropriate way? Is that our responsibility, your responsibility?
Basically, chairs are the chairs, right?
Well, no, it is the chair. So-
Meetings, the secretary is the one that goes on.
Well, So it is, so at the city commission level, they have adopted formal rules of procedure that they give each person 3 minutes. And they have the clerk do the timing of the 3 minutes,
Right.
and they are across the board. Every single person gets a timer, and that's all you get. And if you all would like to run your meetings that way, where every public comment, you get 3 minutes, and that's it, and we're gonna time you, we can do that. If you want to be a little more loosey-goosey, as you have been in the past, where we don't really have a lot of members from the public, so let's really kind of hear you out, but okay, enough is enough. Then that's a matter between the board and particularly for the chair to say when you've had enough. And if the chair isn't sure, right, if the chair isn't sure and the board members are kind of getting antsy, that you as board members can say, Chair, I think I've heard, I'm ready to make a motion,
So usually, you all it's been about 5 minutes approximately, and then we tend to move on if there's not a lot. If, for example, when we did the Gulf Stream.
Right.
So the Gulf Stream was limited, I think, to 2 minutes. And then all the written comments were not read, but were sent prior because we had hundreds of comments. So to give everybody 3 minutes, we would have not completed the agenda before midnight. Okay, so, I mean, you got the flavor of the comments, you know what I mean? And then we had you guys do some homework and free read. So that's not normal. Normally there may be one person, maybe two speaking, and we'll usually have about three items on the agenda for the evening. So usually it's about 5 minutes. If things are out of hand and you need backup from Elizabeth and I, we're happy to provide that for you to move things on.
If it is a bigger item where we know there's going to be lots of public comment, we will give you a strategy to manage that.
Maybe we can direct the chair to timer or.
Yes,
we can track it.
Yes. absolutely.
All right, you're back to me. So we wanted to give kind of a brief overview of the COA process, since COAs are that primary design review tool. So basically, a COA states that the scope of work that someone's proposing is compatible and appropriate for the resource provided. And it meets the standards and criteria to grant a COA. So design review, we've got specific criteria, like I've said before, that we outline in every staff report for different topics. So these are the guidelines that you should be legally basing your decisions off of. So a successful design review, it follows our compatibility criteria. It considers the significant character defining features of the architectural style on whatever property we're looking at and how those features will be impacted. It also considers the significance of the structure and the surrounding districts. So proposals for things other than new construction should be falling under one of these 4 treatment options that we're going to discuss in a second. Unsuccessful design review, arbitrary. So it needs to be impartial. It needs to follow the code. There's not a one size fits all situation for us in these design reviews. Every resource is unique, but we need to keep an eye on the precedents that we're setting in our decisions. If you're going to make a decision that breaks with our past precedent, we need to have a logical, justifiable reason for doing so that's supported by our code and by our criteria. So if we're going to do something different, you got to back it up. So preservation terminology, it's getting a little covered up, but that's okay. So historic preservation is actually an umbrella term for a bunch of similar practices, which are technically 4 treatments at the national level. Preservation is pretty rarely used in its truest sense. It means just to sustain the existing form of a historic property, basically freezing it in time. So this example here, Drayton Hall in Charleston, South Carolina, it's an 18th century plantation. When it got deeded to the National Trust for Historic Preservation in the 1970s, they decided to keep it exactly how it was the day they got it. So literally, if paint chips off the walls, they put it back up. That's it. They do not touch it. They leave it exactly as it is. They just sustain it throughout time. Reconstruction is showing by new construction the form, features, and detailing of a non-surviving site to replicate its appearance at a specific point in time. So Colonial Williamsburg, we've got as our example here. So this isn't just, I think this is what it looked like. This is probably what it looked like. It has to be evidence-based, architectural plans, photos, the same location and context. So being in the same district or the same grouping of buildings, and it can't be misrepresented as the real historic property. You can't walk by and think that's the one from 1920. You have to be able to know that this is a new version of what was once there. So then we've got restoration. This is taking a property back to a particular period of time. So it's not keeping it exactly as it was, like preservation. This is taking it back. So we've got Montpelier here, which was James Madison's home. It's another National Trust property, but when they got it this time, they decided not to keep it exactly as it was. They decided to remove all of the alterations and additions that had happened since the 1820s when he owned it. So they brought it back to what it would have looked like when he knew it. And then our final one, the one we see most often and the one you'll see most often here, is rehabilitation. So this is making a compatible use for a property through repairs, alterations, and additions, while preserving the features that most clearly convey its historical significance. So that can be, a house to a house. It could be, in this case, we've got a Greyhound station in Savannah, Georgia, that was turned into a restaurant. So it can be a new or a different use, but it's making it work for our lives today. And we're back to Elizabeth with more law.
Okay. This is the part where I say, really, truly, thank you so much for volunteering. All right, so being on this board subjects you to a few different points of Florida law. And one of them is sunshine law. Sunshine law was created by the Florida legislature to prevent closed door decision making. And so it applies to all elected and appointed government bodies. That's why it applies to all of you. It prohibits conversations between two or more board members on matters that may foreseeably come before your board. All right, so if you are talking out in the community about historic preservation, don't talk with each other. All right, you can talk with any other resident of the city. You can talk with your city commission members, anybody who is not on this board. Just do not talk about historic preservation with each other outside of a noticed public meeting. That's the biggest thing for you.
On anything. Like if you're like, hey, I heard about this grant, maybe the city can go for, don't call Bob and talk about the. Call us and say, hey, I'd like the board to talk about the grant. Let's put it on the agenda and then let's talk about it.
Don't call each other and talk about setbacks or any of those other things, okay? That's right. So, what does communication mean? Communication is face-to-face, on the phone, text message, social media post, fax machine, email, notes on a napkin, it doesn't matter, it's a conversation, okay? Goes both ways. If you communicated ideas, it's a conversation. And it doesn't matter how the communications are made, when the communications are made, where the communications are made, you know, just stay away from it. It does not prohibit you from communicating with your staff. Staff is your go-to on all of these legal issues. So if you have questions about something, if you have issues that you think need to come before the board, if you have residents who are constantly calling you about this issue and you want to be able to provide them information, always go to staff. If you get emails, text messages, social media posts and whatnot from residents in the community that are related to historic preservation, send them on to staff. They are, again, they are your go-to on all things. If you use staff as part of your decision-making process, or if you use staff as a go-between, hey, Aaron, I can't talk to Bob, so will you tell him? Then you have just made staff subject to sunshine. So let's not do that, okay?
But if you do talk to us and you say, I have questions about your staff report, why did you say this, or why did you do that? Just disclose it at the point and just say, I had a couple questions. I talked to staff.
That goes back to the ex parte communication. Staff is included in that. If you come and sit down with staff or have questions and you go over the staff report or go over, you know, look at maps with staff, that counts. You need to disclose that.
And this is really tricky too, because I mean, social media, I know that from my house recently, they were contributing structure that was demolished. You know, there's some conversations happening out there in the sphere, and some healthy conversation, you know.
Ignore them.
Right, you have to, because if you put anything in there, you could be communicating with a fellow board member that posted maybe yesterday on that same thread. So you just gotta be really vigilant about this.
Yes, and you need to disclose it if you reviewed all that, you know, that I saw a social media post about this. I reviewed all of the content on it, and you need to screenshot all of that and send it to Sherry.
If you see something on the agenda that you get it from Sherry and you really don't comprehend what it's saying or you're. Well, that's,
What is that?
no, that's fine.
So that's what I was confused by, because I thought you first said call you, and then you said, no, it's not
No,
on
no.
each other.
Don't
Yeah.
call
You
it-
know, you said if you're talking.
No, just at the beginning, if you call us to explain something in the staff report, just say that you called staff at the beginning.
Just mention it to me.
Just mention at the meeting, I talked to staff about this, and we'll remember what you
I was
called.
gonna say, if we forget what you said.
We can help you with that, and then, also too, you know, we remember what you call us about, so if you're like, I had a couple questions, and then if the applicant were to ask me, because again, this is about the applicant knowing the investigations that you've done outside of the room, so if I can disclose to the applicant and say, okay, we had a conversation and they had a couple questions about what was in the staff report or the content or the ask, what was the request? And then we just provided clarity on that. So, and that's usually what the most questions we get is, board members that, don't understand exactly what is being asked. We try to make things really clear, but sometimes we have to use words that are consistent with our LDRs, and maybe those words aren't as clear to you, especially if you're getting started. That's fine to do
I
that.
encourage you.
Yeah, staff is your greatest resource, and we are all here to support you in this role.
But if you talk on social media and you display a bias, you may not be able to vote on that item.
Right.
You may have to,
And since we're on the social media discussion, it is also, if you are making comments on social media related to your role on this board, then it is a public record. And you need to make sure, my recommendation to you is to make sure if you make or receive any records related to your role on Historic Preservation Board, that you provide those to staff. Because if there is a public records request 5 years from now for something that you have or had and should still have because of the state records retention requirements for public records, then the city will come and ask you for it. And if you can't find it, don't have it, they may subpoena your phone or your computer to the court for review. And you may subject yourself to penalties if you
people have had to give up their cell phone.
public records.
So if it
So-
comes to light that you've texted somebody about an application and somehow it gets denied and then that application is litigated or appealed later, your phone can be, you
Did
may
you
have
say
to.
thank you for volunteering?
So just,
So, again, public records are any document made or received in the transaction of public business to create or formalize knowledge on the issue, okay? So you may get, again, doesn't matter, social media posts, emails, text messages, notes on a napkin, a map, a Word document, it doesn't matter what it is. It's really the content of the message, okay? So if you have any of those things, and for some boards, it's really rare for them to have any of those types of issues other than the staff report that staff gave them. But if you get anything from a friend or, if an applicant for whatever reason sends you additional information, any of those types of things that you get, or if you're posting on social media, again, do not recommend that. All those things would need to go to staff for your protection, so you don't have to think about it in the future. All right, a little bit more on ethics. In addition to the voting conflicts of interest, there are also some things that ethics rules prohibit. There are some allowances, but my rule to recommend to all of you is do not accept gifts. Thank you so much for volunteering for historic preservation. I know it's a big job. Here, tickets to the fair. No thank
buy your own coffee,
you. Yes, buy your own cup.
buy your pack of gum,
You also, as board members for the city, you are not allowed to enter into contracts with the city for goods and services. So if you or one of your relatives has such a contract, you give me a call, let me know, we need to talk about it. I see you was very confused.
Okay, no, it's
Unless it's a public bid, right?
Unless there's a public bid, right? There are exemptions to all of this sort of stuff. So like I said, if you have something like that, give me a call. We can talk through the specifics of it. All of the ethics issues are very fact specific. So I always recommend if you think you might know something or have something, give me a call. The sooner you know, the better we can handle it. And yes. Okay, that's again on gifts. My recommendation is just don't accept gifts. All right, so there is some training that is provided here. We can provide these links to you. One is the state's ethics training that includes public records, sunshine, and ethics. And the other is the Palm Beach County required ethics training.
Yes, you did the Palm Beach County.
Yes. And I promise this is the last slide. This is just directing you to the city webpage. We've got a ton of resources on our webpage, including the design guidelines. So if you're looking for more information, we've got a lot there. And then, of course, like they've said over and over again, staff are here as a resource for you as well. So with that, we have finally finished our training session.
Congratulations, you made it.
All right.
Yay, so far now. Next month, we'll do zoning.
All right, so let's get this meeting rolling. Okay, swearing in of staff and applicants.
So if you plan to give testimony this evening, please stand and raise your right hand. And everybody that's planning to give testimony, if you're planning on speaking at all, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say yes.
Yes.
Proof of publication.
There were no items requiring legal ad.
Roll call opponent.
None.
Consent. We're good there. Public hearing, any board disclosures? You good? We're good. All set. No disclosures. Vote, all good. No disclosures. All right. Done for myself. Unfinished business.
Let's see, we have no unfinished business.
All right, so we're gonna go on to new business. Hi, everybody in the back. We had a little training session. Sorry for the delay. Okay, I guess we're starting with request by, all right, Hrpb project number 2300000011.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. For the record, this is Hrpb, Preservation Planner for the City of Lakewood Beach. And our first item is Hrpb project number 2300000011. That's a consideration of a certificate of appropriateness for mural property. Can you hear me better now? Okay, that's for property located at 128 North Lakeside Drive. Next slide, please. So it's located in the multifamily residential district and has a future land use of downtown mixed use. Next slide, please. So a little background about this project. This property was cited for work without permit for installing mural and signs. So the property owner put in a permit on March 27. And then we had a few meetings with them. And we decided to split the murals and signs separately so that we can process the signs and bring the murals to the Hrpb. Next slide, please. So as you can see on the photograph on the bottom, this is what they had installed on their walls. As it's just a painting of like soft water vegetation. You can see mango trees, water fountain, and birds. And this was done by artist Eva Belinsky. Next slide, please. So if you look at the LDR and you look at the standard and requirement for murals, it meets most of these requirements. The mural is not facing any major thoroughfare. There are no commercial signs in the mural. But one thing we have to look at is that murals are permitted in commercial and industrial districts, but this is in a multifamily residential district. Therefore, it has to be looked at case by case by the board. Next slide, please. And then the last criteria that we looked at is for the community appearance criteria, and also meets all our criteria. It's the murals like appears to be in good state, good taste, and also sufficient quality. So staff recommends approval of the mural with the following conditions that a building permit should be applied for. Also, the approval does not include any physical alteration to the building, and also a removal agreement shall be entered between the applicant and the city of Lakewood Beach. These are your motions. Thank you.
Yeah, is the owner here?
Yes.
Like, you gotta state your name and all, and address for sharing.
My name is Chad Patel, and I'm from the Mango and Bed and Breakfast, 128 North Lakeside Drive.
How this all come about is basically part we
So I'm just looking to beautify my property. I moved from California about 8 years ago to acquire this bed and breakfast. This bed and breakfast was the only reason I moved to Lake Worth. And then I started falling in love with the city and the quirkiness of the town, you know. It's the only place in South Florida where there's no traffic, which is, yes. So, you know, we had a tough few years. We weren't able to do a lot to the property. Last year or earlier this year, we decided to try to beautify the property. A local artist came to us and she said, I can, you know, create something amazing. I told her what I wanted, and I wanted it to be tasteful and I wanted it to fit in with our neighborhood. Because I didn't want it to be an eyesore. It's a bed and breakfast. We're trying to invite guests and invite our neighbors to come about and spend time at the property. And so, you know, with going back and forth a few times with her, we were able to figure out a good design. And it took her about 3 months of coming back, spending countless hours, creating this mural for us. And then towards the end of it, we found out that we were in violation. So it was a bit disappointing and sad, but hopefully, you know, with your help, we're able to, you know, come to an agreement and where we can keep that side of the, you know, the area and the property looking beautiful and inviting to guests. A lot of neighbors in the area have said that they really love it. I haven't gotten any negative feedback. So that's really all I have to
Are
say.
you okay with your recommendation?
Oh, yeah, it's all done already. Everything's done. We were trying to do this a few months back, but we were a little short staffed. So we had to wait till now. But thanks for letting me speak and thanks for volunteering to help us.
Hey, here we go. Thank you. Any public comment? Okay. Good.
It meets all, I check out every single one of the, you know, of your recommendations here, it meets everything, so I know that where I stand.
Make a motion.
Okay, I move to approve Hrpb project number 23-000011 for mural installation for the structure located at 128 North Lake 7 Drive. Now there are some conditions, they've already been met, I believe, that they've already applied, so I don't need to say with
You
conditions.
just say with
or-
conditions anyway.
with the conditions, that they apply for the building permit. The application meets the mural criteria based on the data and analysis in the staff report.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay, Chair, do you have a second? Any discussion?
Just being new to
Sure.
the process, what is a mural removal agreement?
So whenever the city needs to remove the mural. Sorry, so whenever the city needs to, you know, do anything and it's required for the mural to be removed, the city has, you know, the right to do so, so they have to agree to that.
It would be in a case where the mural was deteriorated and the property owner was not maintaining it, the city could pay for it.
Thank you.
So we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? So we're good. Unanimous.
And
Good, thank you. You welcome.
I will also mention that we're always gonna provide you potential motions. And they're always at the end of the staff report. There's a section on potential motions. And it'll say there'll be one in the affirmative, one in the negative. And it will usually say with conditions and provide you as a guide. So you can look at it in your staff report, and then we usually also try to pull it up as part of the presentation as well.
That's the Hrpb project number 23-00100142 129 South Southview Road.
Awesome. So for the record, this is Annie Greening. I'm the Senior Preservation Planner for the city. So like our chair said, this is a COA for door and side light replacements with integral mini blinds at the property located at 129 South Gulfview Road, unit number 7. This is a non-contributing resource in the South Palm Park Historic District. So there we've got our location map. We're at the corner of South Gulfview and 2nd Avenue South right there. So these are some scans of our original drawings. So this building was originally constructed in 1961 in a very simple version of the mid-century modern style. It was originally a 3-story, 8-unit apartment building that had, some kind of classic character defining features, stucco exterior, deep roof overhangs, and at the time of construction, it had a decorative masonry breeze block railings on each floor. And they did have full light glazed doors as well. So we had some major alterations in 1981 that brought us to our current appearance. So they added a full 4th story for a penthouse, and they replaced all of that masonry breeze block with some metal railings.
Wasn't that a famous family that did that construction? I believe so.
I think so, yeah.
You can pull it.
And then we did have some additional window and door replacements in 2009. So that's kind of how we got to the appearance we're at right now. So we're looking today specifically at unit number 7. So these are the existing and proposed doors. So right now they've got, more decorative glazing. It is, very different than the original just full light glass doors. What's being proposed is full light double doors and full light side lights in an impact, glazing, which none of that is the problem that we're discussing tonight. The issue we're discussing tonight is the integral mini blinds. So it's not just blinds on the outside of the door, it's the blinds between the glass. So that is standard, not something that we approve in the historic district. So kind of getting into that, our standard requirement is that windows will have glazing that is clear, non-reflective, and without tint. Same for doors. Low E coatings have been permitted by the board and the city commission to promote energy efficiency. Basically, the determination was that they will be functionally equivalent to clear glass as it's a coating applied rather than an integral tint. So the same concept kind of applies to blinds in historic districts. External blinds added, to the wall or to the outside of a window or a glazed door are totally appropriate to provide some shade and privacy. Integral blinds that are permanently affixed between the layers of glass in a window or door were not used in historic architecture and are not considered appropriate. On top of all of that is the visual impact of a mini blind. So the architectural design of mid-century multifamily buildings really emphasizes visual consistency and repetition. So consistent window and door designs for each unit. And with the exception of unit number 9, all units at 129 South Gulfview Road do not use mini blinds in their glazing. So unit number 9, which is that one on the left there, applied in 2021 for a COA for replacement windows and doors. It was approved by staff. The full light doors that they installed have internal mini blinds, which was not noted on the COA application and was outside the scope of staff's approval. So they approved full lights, they approved full light glazing,
Right.
and then mini blinds were installed.
The mini blinds were not approved. They were added after the fact outside the scope of the permit.
It was not
Actually a different.
It was a
door
different
installed
door than what was
than what was
approved.
approved, because that
Correct.
comes with the
So it was
door.
after the final.
It was,
Never final.
Well, it was final, but I don't think that we may have sometimes during that time period, we used contract building inspectors who
Okay.
may not have been to the detail, and we may not have had the staff at the time to send out a historic person to double check as well. So it got through the system. So it was finalized, this other one. But what we're showing you here, so for non-contributing structures, this is a non-contributing structure,
Mhm.
we don't have a lot of requirements, right? But the main thing is that they're architecturally consistent, right? With the style. And so really the point here is that everything is supposed to look alike. When you put the mini blinds on the inside, it changes the look. And that's what you're here to decide is to change it enough.
So we have a building that has how many units in it? 10, 8?
I believe there's 9,
Okay. That's number 9,
correct.
as it is right today.
As it
I
is,
totally
yep.
understand.
With the mini blinds that were
You got you
installed.
got a window blank, and that's one with blinds on the inside.
Yeah,
And
you
blinds
have
on the
one.
inside or left?
Yeah, you can have
Blinds on the inside are allowed.
Yeah,
And you can see it doesn't change the glazing, like you can see how much the color changes with the mini blinds on the inside, and this was staff's concern.
Okay, question. Do we have a shot, walking by or driving by? Looking at what we're talking about.
I think we
Do you
saw
have
it at
the
beginning,
song?
like, not of that
No,
Side.
I think so.
Yeah, let me back up here. And there, the applicant has a presentation as well that has a good shot of it. It is roughly here. It was hard for me to get a good one from Google because we've got these lovely trees and poles in the way. But yes, the applicant does have some good photos from the street as well.
Okay.
So,
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Of course.
yeah.
How did go back to the, back.
How far back?
The one with the door that's in there now. Oh,
Yeah,
how did that get
that was the eighties.
That was the eighties.
there?
There was no historic preservation ordinance,
That's all people from.
or it was the nineties. It's pre-ordinance.
So now we caught between the rock and the hard.
Right, so I mean, this is part of the difficult discussion. I mean, it's a very fine detail, you know, and so that's something that you'll be here to discuss. This is not something that so there is a scope of authority that staff can approve.
Right.
And this is outside that scope of authority. 99% of all applications that come through the historic in the historic districts are approved by staff at an administrative level.
Right.
Staff is currently reviewing and processing over 20 permits per week in historic for all types of architectural modifications, windows, doors, additions, all kinds of things. We do 20 to 25 a week. So you all see a very, very, very shallow depth of what we look at. And there are things in our ordinance. It says in our ordinance, has to be clear, has to be this. So if it's not that, then it goes to you and you all then are going to make a policy or a decision, and that decision could be to the individual circumstances of the property itself, which I would recommend because our ordinance does not support many blinds in windows and doors. If you feel leaning in favor, but the reality is that you can see while it is a fine detail, it is different, you know, and this is why it is not clear it is anymore. So I think we should hear from the applicant probably and hear. Mhm.
Yeah. Can I have one more question?
Mhm.
Where you had that outlined in red?
Well, let's hear from the applicant
Okay.
first. And then,
Good evening. Let me start. Thanks for being here. I've served on a planning and zoning board, so I know what you're going through. At least tonight, you started in the 1800s, which are history.
Yeah.
When we started, they started us with English law. And we had to develop. So you probably get that when they talk about zoning. And just another comment for the new members on the board. We rely heavily on staff. Okay, that's an important function for you guys. They give you things to look at. Okay, you may not, as a board, agree with what they do, but they give you areas to look at, and you may have other areas to look at. So hopefully, if you've gone through their report, which is what I'm going to talk about. And I guess I should introduce myself, Richard Norowski. I'm the owner of 129 South Gulfview, here in Lakewood, Florida. My wife Kathy is here, and William Hammocky is from the contractors going to be doing the installation. So my goal tonight is to show you the impact on the neighborhood, and I think you already started to ask some of those questions. Okay. Talk about the glazing issue, okay, because with this manufacturer, it is clear glass. Glass they put into this door is the same glass they're going to put in a clear door. Okay, so there's no difference between having the blinds behind one pane of glass and the blinds on the interior. Okay. There are several advantages to the embedded blinds, which I'd like to discuss with you people. And then hopefully, you know, you'll look at this, and what I'm looking for is, as they implied, you could do a variance. Okay, it says for this particular situation, okay, this makes sense to do.
We can do the exception.
Exception.
It wouldn't be in a it wouldn't be a variance.
So if you wanted to support the mini blinds, what you would have to say is that the mini blinds in this case are architecturally compatible and consistent with this architectural style. And that the mini blinds are consistent with the design style. It's the standard
Specific property.
for this
Yes.
property. You would say this property, this circumstance, this,
But it's not a variance.
No,
it's not a variance, it's a design review.
That's what I was, that's my
Yeah,
question.
But it needs to be based in the criteria, which,
Property specific, not to make a precedent.
Right.
Situation.
and
like
then,
here. Okay.
right, so
All
the,
right, so we're gonna go back to the owner. And we'll get back to you, Scott.
Can we go to slide 2?
yes. Let's see. Oh dear. It decided to retroactively follow my, there we
I'm
go.
gonna basically cover the background on the building and you were asking some questions on that. And then talk about our door selection process and, turn it over to you for approval. So if we can go on to the next one. You've seen this picture before. This is an old picture of the building. You thought there was some significance to this. An individual named Goddard did the initial 3 floors. Then an individual named Johnson came in. And his claim to fame was the Ripley's Believe It or
That's
Not.
I couldn't remember if we Ripley's and Barber.
It was Ripley.
Yeah.
And his concept was to turn around and make this building a compound for his family.
Nice.
Okay, that was his idea. The kids didn't agree.
Okay.
Okay, so he built all of this. I think one moved in for a short period of time and then left. And then in 2010, when Kathy and I retired and the housing market hit the bottom, okay, it kind of, everything came together because his wife said to him, "We've held this property for so long, the kids are not interested, get rid of it." So we had an opportunity to buy into the property. And we're very proud of that building, and there's 9 units in there. And it's a very close community. Wednesdays, we usually get around the pool when we're around, and we're proud of it. We have a lot of people walk by that building and say, "Gee, this is nice." And we've actually 1 unit sold last year. And the woman who bought the property grew up in Lake Worth and then moved out west. And then she said, when we got to meet her, she said, "As a kid, I always dreamed of living in that building." And the day it went on the market, she was watching it and she made a bid, an overbid, and bought the property. So that's the way we feel about it. That's the way we want to maintain the property. If you go on to the next one, you've seen this, those are the wooden doors. Okay. These were installed on both units 7 and 9. Okay. In my opinion, what the architect was doing is when they did that building, you'll notice there's an accent with the white railings on the building. There's a very unique to the city is the white spiral staircase that brings you up to the 3rd floor, at which point you saw 2 of those white doors. So 7 and 9 always had the same doors in it. Okay, so to me, that's some history, and we would like to keep that kind of history going forward. If we go on to the next one, as a matter of fact, I think you've got it there. I think I still have one of these. Does it work?
It won't work on the TV.
It won't work on the TV. Thank you. But if you look up there, my door is on the left, and you look to the right there to the right is number 9, and you could see, if we could blow it up, you'd see that they are the same doors. This is a vintage picture. Okay, so that's the history of the building. All right, we go on to the next one. That's a better representation to the door because the model that staff had picked up it kind of gave it a yellow color. It is a white color that matches the building. Okay. And it's a thermatrude door. Okay, that was picked out first. That is the exact door that we want to put into 9. We're not going to a different manufacturer. Okay, because we want them to match, exactly. If you go one more slide, please. Here is a view of the 3rd floor. Okay, and this starts getting into some of the issues and why we chose the mini blinds. Okay, my door is on the left-hand side. That is the elevator door right next to it, and that's the entryway to unit 9 on the right. That diagonal railing that's going basically in front of the firebox there, for some reason, is the gathering place for everybody on the 3rd floor. I don't know why, but they come out of the elevator and they stand there, waiting to get into 9. They'll come out of 9 and 8, which is on the same floor. They'll go over to that railing and make their phone calls. Okay. In addition to that, if you look just above the doors, there's the building safety security light. That goes on at dusk and stays on all night long. All right. One of the recommendations is put plain glass in. All right. Even with that pebble glass in the wooden doors, it's hard to ignore the fact that the people are standing outside your door, okay, and making deliveries, or the fact that the light is in there. So an advantage of mini blinds is at least you can close them at night, okay, and reduce that light. And during the day, open them so you can get the natural light into the living room. That opens right to our living room. So you're sitting there watching television and looking out at people standing in front of your door. Okay. We go on to the next one. Here is the approval by the association. And that approval says specifically the doors in 9, including the mini blinds. Okay. We didn't, as a kind of association, know that there was an issue or that they did not disclose the mini blinds when they did 9. Okay, but now it exists. Okay. We want to maintain that consistency of the historical presence of the building. So at this point, we're saying, let's go with those. So I am a member, I'm an officer with the condominium association. And there's another reason why we prefer the mini blinds as opposed to a solid glass door. We are going to do this, and I would expect any owner after us to do that because of reasons I just showed you. Are going to put something on the inside of that door. Okay. The association no longer has control of what gets put in on the door. I mean, I could put in some nice little opaque thing. Somebody could come down who's a Patriots fan and put the Patriots logo. Okay, or 80 for Brady on the door. Okay, as a condominium association, we lost control. Okay. We're a 9-member unit. All of us by charter are board members. Okay. Which gives us a problem. As everybody says, a board member, I don't know how much you know about condominium law, but all of us as board members means that we cannot have the board required for assessing penalties. Because the board that does this penalties cannot be a board member or cannot be related to a board member, but must be a member of the community. So there is no way. So as owners of the committee, we could complain to the owner to take down whatever is on the inside of the door, but we cannot penalize them. Okay, so it'd be ineffective,
Right.
okay? Let's go on and talk about the impact to the community. There it is, there's our community. We're looking from the 3rd floor out, so we got a parking lot to complain, we got the pumping station, or we got the park. Okay, so what happens on the building, okay, does not affect anybody across the street. All right, if we can go on to the next one. This is a view from Gulfview Road. Okay, it's from the sidewalk. All right. Right behind that umbrella is, and this is the best view from that street. Okay, so it's awful hard to pick out. You can't see 9 at all. You can possibly make out 7 behind that umbrella. All right, if you go on to the next one. I wanted to give you a full view of this because maybe you haven't gone by. This is from the corner of 2nd Avenue South and from Gulfview. Okay, so now you can just about see those doors. But again, to pick out a slight variation, because of the blinds in there, it's gonna be pretty difficult to do. Now, let me take you, we're at about 80 feet from the doors at this point in time. So let's go one more. This is at the front gate, which is 30 feet. Okay, so if you're standing on the sidewalk, the closest you can get the best visibility you can see of those doors, this is it. Okay. To be consistent, and I'm an engineer by background, so I don't know what you guys would like to do. I walked out to the middle of the road. Okay, this is what a car would see. Can you go to the next one? This is the middle of the road looking from Gulfview. Go to the next one.
Yep.
This is the middle of the road from the corner. Okay, again, we're far enough away, we can't see much. Let's go middle of the road, and this is again the closest point to those doors. Maybe you can pick out 9, but it's difficult. Okay. So
Sorry.
conclusion off of that is basically the impact of putting these doors in is not going to affect the community, it's going to affect the residents in the building. All right. Got ahead of myself. Okay. Door selection criteria. I mentioned the doors open up onto a common area. Okay, if you're familiar with condo law, you have common area, you have limited common. Limited common means it's my balcony, nobody else can go there. Common area means anybody can walk there, anybody can stand there, they can make their phone calls, etc. We talked about the light pollution. Staff in your report had made a couple of, if you will, give me a couple of options. One was to replicate the original material. Okay, we're getting rid of the wood doors because they leak water, they leak air, they open in, which is now and they're not working proof. Okay. So the option other than that, we're not gonna put wood back in because it's energy inefficient. Okay, so it would be putting in the pebble glass. Okay, the pebble glass would not meet with the rest of the building. Okay,
Just to clarify, the original material was not that door, it was the door consistent with the mid-century staff was implying, and it wasn't the pebble glass, it would have been clear, consistent with. So I think that was a confusion, I just wanted to set the record straight.
yeah, the door, well, I'm saying the door were
Yeah,
replaced.
so
The
the-
original 2 doors. with the
Right,
wood-
we don't
Yeah.
require replacement in kind for material, we allow for impact
Yeah.
in our historic district, so the replacement in kind was to, the recommendation would be to replace without the mini blinds, your same door. That would be, that's the replacement to match the full light door, that would be our equivalent with an impact. So what you're proposing, except for the mini blinds, what is staff's recommendation?
Right, and as I had said, let's give some reasons why your recommendation of a clear glass door would have a negative impact on the owners.
Right, but
Okay.
you were talking about the pebble glass and the
Oh,
wood door, that's,
yeah.
I just want to clarify the record for you that that's not what we were recommending.
I thought, my interpretation was you were recommending that we do something consistent with the door that is in, the wooden door that
We
is
were
in
not.
place. Okay, all right,
All right.
okay. One of the other options was an interlayer of an opaque interlayer of some sort.
Yeah, so I think that, I mean, did you have any? Yes, that,
Yeah,
so,
okay,
so
we didn't think putting in a white.
we didn't,
So a standard option that's provided, we've gotten questions about mini blinds before. Standard, what we tell property owners is, regular blinds on the door or window. And then our standard options are also that front doors and bathroom windows may use a white interlayer for privacy screening.
Again, the white interlayer, in my opinion, makes it look like a doctor's office. Okay, it does not reflect the property values that we have there. It just makes it look like a cheap door. I'm sorry, that's my opinion. So that brought us to the attachments they were referring to, and there are the manufacturer, and I'm going to let the representative talk about this, but the manufacturer says any such attachments negate the warranty on the door. Okay, he can talk to that. So why don't I introduce or let Will come up and talk to you about the glass that's going to be used. And if I can then come back and summarize. Is that okay with you?
Summarize.
Okay, yeah.
So-
Yeah, I'm-
I just want to show you all, draw your attention, because this is your first one on page 4 in particular. It says additional guidelines for non-contributing structures. So depending on your motion, if you made a motion to deny, you wouldn't need to add any additional evidence. But if you wanted to make a motion to approve, you would want to look back at those and then provide evidence that the project is consistent with those standards. Okay?
What is the white thing that you're talking about?
The white interlayer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a picture of that or?
So it's basically, it's like an interlayer, it creates a frosting. It's not something that we, really what we want here and what the perspective is kind of the crux of your decision is for these projects, whenever there is a multifamily project with a mid-century or a masonry vernacular style, we want all the doors to be the same, right? So whatever door the HOA picks, we want them to be cool with that door.
What's on all the other?
So the other ones, except for that one with the mini blinds, is all glass, one pane of glass. And usually some of them have curtains or something in the back. Now, so what your decision is today is do the mini blinds, are they different enough that they are not visually compatible with the whole, that they, that they impact the harmony of the architecture? That's the decision that you're making. So if you feel like the mini blind isn't going to detract from the architecture in this case, then you would make findings of fact related to it. If you feel like the mini blind is creating a visual difference, then you would make finding consistent with staff. So that's where this is the crux of what you're doing.
Okay, and then you're going with consistency of an entire building, so
Yes.
if we do and when we do get a motion, it should be made for the building specific.
Right,
rather than
because
that unit.
because otherwise we're back here doing this over and over and over and over again, right? So this is the issue, because this is a non-contributing structure. So, okay, and then we said that at the beginning, and that's important. The criteria for review are less stringent than for a contributing structure. However, the one thing we do for multifamily is we make sure it's architecturally consistent. So whatever the architecture is, whatever you're doing it, has to be consistent with the architecture of the structure. So while
Consistent with number 9, we be comfortable with that.
So you really need to say, it's not about my comfort, it's about your comfort with this door as a whole being replicated throughout the structure. And is this type of door consistent with the architectural style over as a whole here? Or is that, do the mini blinds in this application, are they not significant enough to impact the architectural consistency of the structure? That's really where your decision.
Right, so we don't get the other 8 units here next year.
So
Well, why
if
can't we-
if it's consistent with the
Okay.
structure, then it's consistent with the structure.
Right.
Okay.
Let's hear from this
So-
gentleman.
Okay, then I'll.
You're gonna comment, and then we're gonna discuss, all right.
Good evening, my name is Wayne Hancock with Rights and Back Windows and Doors.
Speak up, please.
My main concern with one of the things the building department suggested, the blinds, is one of the number 1 rules of impact window and doors is you cannot drill into them. So essentially, installing interior blinds would void the warranty. It compromises the airflow, or more so the lack of which. And it just can't be done. It would not be doing a service for the homeowner. So that is why I personally think interior blinds are integral. And you can't just hang them on interior or on impact windows and doors like you can some windows and doors.
If you'd like to see, this is the glass they use.
Clear.
That's clear. Okay, that same glass goes into the clear window. Or the mini blind door. Okay, there's no difference. All they do is the same glass insert. Could you go to the next slide? I actually went back out to Thermatru, the manufacturer, and they gave me the statement basically saying, mini blinds, they're using the same glass, and they say that any, thing you put on, like the interior blinds, they have to be attached to the window treatment with a pass-through bolt and a finish ring or washer. So it's gotta go from the outside of the door to the inside, okay? Which is,
Right.
you know, it's gonna make the door look much cheaper, and they say a pass-through bolt weakens the door. And this is one of the reasons we're putting it in. This is the last non-hurricane proof door in the condominium association. I wanted to make a comment about the historical significance. Those two doors, 7 and 9, were wooden. Okay? And what we, as the association, we're trying to keep that look. Yes, it is different. Okay? We're not here telling you to allow everybody else in the building to go put that, because they've already got their hurricane-proof doors. Okay? We're the only unit that doesn't have it, and the association would like to maintain that historical view that was there. Okay? Couldn't put wood. Okay? It's just not practical. The mini blinds got in there for some reason. Okay, so at this point in time, how do we get it back to its consistent? So all we're asking is for those doors to match.
Okay.
Okay,
I have
That's
a
it.
question, I have a question, I guess, for the installer. Is your intention that the only way that you can install the windows and doors that your company provides is to do these integral mini blinds, or there's no other way to provide shade to the customer?
You would have to change the glass color. It would be a totally different look. And I don't think it would look as clean, frankly. This, yeah, you put them down at night, you can see the light beaming into there. It has great, anti-opaque, powers, if you will. It's really good at blocking light, better than a lot of the glazing or even the films you put on, which will also for the warranty film on it. Is it the only option? No, but none of the other option, all the other options are subpar.
So there's no way to apply curtains or anything without drilling holes in the door that would impact the, you know, the efficacy of the integrity of the.
We would not hang curtains without drilling, without compromising the integrity of the door.
any questions or either of those?
Have the doors been purchased?
We signed the contract in March for the doors. Okay, we will hopefully get them in before hurricane season. And talking to Wright yesterday, they said the lead time was 16, it's now about 6 weeks. If we can get your approval to move forward with these, we can possibly get them in before the season is over. If you turn around and say no, then I've really got to go back to the board and ask for their approval to whatever you told me we have to put in, which is going to add, there's at least 2 week notice on that, and then so I hope I've given you enough to say that there is, I'm not looking to change it for the neighborhood, I'm not looking to change it for the building. Okay, I'm looking to change it for that one unit, so it matches. the
So are those, does that floor look, because I can't tell from the pictures, is that floor distinct? Like, why are those two, why those two be?
Because the architect did it that way, whatever was his vision.
So the rest
When
of
you open the other door, what do you say? A staircase, right?
I'm sorry,
You're number 7?
Yeah.
Number 9 is the staircase.
no, the staircase, well, if you open the door, the staircase is, have you been in there?
Yeah.
It's to the right,
The big unit, that's the big unit, right?
that's the big unit, yeah, that's.
But I
it's
mean,
the
number
entrance
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, do they look like these?
No,
They don't.
The owner took that section of the building and made a brand
Okay.
unit.
That was-
That's helpful.
yeah, that door on 9, it goes up to the penthouse,
Yeah.
so
Gotcha.
they were trying to
So it
differentiate.
is a separate, distinct looking spot on that building.
But there's only what, 2 units on that? 2
There's 3 units on that, but the 3rd unit is
Around the
way around the corner.
on the other side.
So when you, as a matter of fact, when you're looking up this way, you're really looking at those 2 doors
Right.
on the 3rd floor. And like I said, the architect, to my mind, the architect was coming up with something with the spiral staircase leading to these doors up there.
Right, thank you, okay.
Thank you.
Motion, no. Any questions? If there is, okay, need a vote.
Do you want to ask for public comment, Mr. Chair?
Well, we can't talk about this first.
It's better
Is
to
there any-
Public comment over with.
Yeah, is there any public comment?
There's a bunch of letters.
No, okay,
So what you have in front of you is the packet of
Several letters that are. in-
yeah.
7 letters, and that is the public comment that we received prior to the meeting.
I mean, can we just say that for those two doors on? But we're only approving this. unit.
So what you have to say, if you want to prove it, is that the stuff with the mini blinds for this building or for this particular unit is architecturally, it's visually compatible. It's number 5, right? On page 5.
So can we make the motion to be made specifically to the building itself?
It would need to be made specifically to the unit, but you're making the determination that the mini blinds are visually compatible and in harmony with the building. Because it's in harmony, because the standard is in harmony with its neighboring properties as viewed from a public street. This is for non-contributing. So its neighboring properties are the other units. So you would say the mini blinds are visually compatible
Or not?
in this architectural style, in this particular building. You can qualify it in this one application.
I don't understand why you can't just say, because it's that floor, and that floor was made to be, for some reason, special or standing
You can
out.
say it.
You could say that, but you have to say that that floor is visually, that it's visually compatible, that that floor was supposed to be special.
Okay.
And so, but you have to say what you're finding is you're making findings of facts. So you have to refer back to the criteria. You want to pull language out for those standards and say it's consistent and it's visually compatible and you could support facts to your.
Yeah, I guess I have some concerns about, and I appreciate your presentation. I guess I have some concerns about sort of opening up this can of worms and saying, yes, we're going to start approving integral mini blinds, because if we open this can of worms now, where does that lead us down the road with other applicants coming and saying that they want to do this because we did it in this case, when it's not in conjunction with the design guidelines? I have concerns about that.
Then you do have number 9.
Number 9 was not
He's
approved.
not, I mean, he's not.
Well, you have a not.
But it still got through final inspection, whether that was a mistake or
And it
not.
is a non-contributing structure.
Can't take one. to get the other. You got-
Yeah, and I think they do need to match that spot.
Can you clarify real quick again about how those blinds got there to begin with?
You mean in number 9?
Yeah, yeah.
It was.
I think that's what you said though, earlier, didn't you?
The door was approved, it's fine, right, any blinds appeared.
The mini blinds were installed. So,
Right,
so
but it wasn't any overt action by the city because it allowed them to be there. It was, they take matters in their own hands.
no, right, and you've got to understand, not every time, I mean, we're much better currently than we were years ago with our inspections. We really don't have a lot of staff, and sometimes if we're short of inspectors, we use outside consultants.
Right.
And if somebody from Hybrid came by and said, oh, it's a door, let's sign off on it, sometimes that has happened in the past,
I think regarding the point, if you had an individual one house that wanted mini blinds, and I think in that case, you could look at that block and say, well, we feel this is not architecturally in keeping. Just because we said this one was, I think you could still in the future say that another one is not.
And you can also list as one of your reasons that it's a non-contributing structure. And that in this particular instance,
Standards are different.
well, the standard, but it still has to be visually compatible. But in this particular application, in this particular area, it is visually compatible and in harmony with the building. Because by harmony with the building, it's not just the corner, it's that you were saying that the corner is different and that's appropriate for the building as a whole.
Right.
Okay, that was what you were saying.
Yeah.
So this is, you're just, again, this is about making findings of facts consistent with the criteria. So if you're gonna make that, you have to look at the criteria and determine what your facts are.
No, you don't want to do your first one, because I'm not sure how to word it. Well, just read.
You would read number 2, and then
Wait, what page are you on? You're on the last page, very last page, you would say, at the bottom where the more potential function is, right?
It's also up on the screen.
You're right.
Move to approve.
It needs to be-
That one?
Thank you.
so you would read that. The only thing is that you wouldn't say based on the staff report, you would say based on the testimony at the public hearing and based on the fact that you feel that it's consistent with number with a criteria for non-contributing structures because of these reasons. Sorry, that was a typo. We usually are we recommend approval most of the time, so it's usually.
Okay, so I move to approve Hrpb project number 23-00100142 for certificate of appropriateness for door and sidelight replacements with integral mini blinds to the property located at 129 South Fulton Road, Unit 7.
Because, state your reasons.
Because it's consistent with the one beside it.
So you were, based on what you were
So go
saying,
back to page 4 in your staff report then.
at the bottom, it says that you feel like it's consistent with section 23.5-4K.
2.
And specifically, if you go to the top of page 5, you feel that it's visually compatible.
And in harmony with the neighboring properties, and you're saying neighboring properties are
In the building.
units next to it. Okay.
Okay, and why do you feel that it's visually, because we have evidence in the staff report that it's not visually compatible. Why is your evidence?
Because that floor was set aside to have this special look with different doors from everybody else. And those 2 sets of doors should be the same as the back.
So I have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay, I have a second. Vote. Any further discussion?
I just think it's really consistent with all my service and volunteers on these boards about, I'm a lawyer, so, there's a thing about correcting bad decisions or, wrong moves, and I agree, it has the potential to go down a path and get out of control, but I'm going to maintain my consistency in that conservative basis, and I'm opposed to that point, because the foundation of the argument is on a premise upon somebody taking matters.
Right. And I understand. So I have a first and a second. We discussed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No.
Aye. Opposed.
You
You're
say nay.
opposed?
Say nay.
1, 2, 3, 4. Passes 4-2.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
Now. We have one conceptual.
No, yeah, we're done. Yeah,
Yeah,
we're done.
That's
We're
correct.
done. So we have a conceptual.
Yes.
I want to give us a quick 5-minute break, guys. I'm sorry. I have to. Okay. 5 minutes, Steve, right?
maybe we can do it, like next month or,
The month after.
the month after. I think you're doing such a great job.
You are.
Are we back?
Thank you. Okay, now, as
We're gonna make a quick presentation for the conceptual you provided us, and then you'll go, okay.
explain to the new board members what a conceptual review is.
It's also good because I'm.
Okay. Basically, what we're basically doing is they're coming to us with opinions and options and all that. So when we get to say, now I don't like it, now that's ugly, I'll move that over there. And
You don't get to say that's ugly. You get to say
Well,
that's not consistent with the
we can
standards.
keep our opinion. I don't like that,
You guys say something.
right,
No.
in my opinion. Go ahead.
So staff, as we were able to get the couple options, and so staff was able to put together a presentation just to walk you through the options, and then we'll have the applicant here to ask, we can ask questions of them.
Cool. Go.
Awesome. So if my computer will respond to a click, it might not. We're going to try the share screen again so we can get through the presentation. All right, so we've got a conceptual review. We're at 1405 South Palm Way. We're looking at a potential new addition as well as a pool. Unlike the last property, this is a contributing resource. So here we are, very close to 14th and South Palm Way here. And so a little history, especially since we've got some new members. So this project was previously heard as at the July Hrpb meeting. So at that meeting, the applicant proposed removal of the existing front facade and construction of an addition to the front of the house. That is something that we generally try to completely avoid in preservation, as the facades, you know, it's the face of the structure. It's what is most important on contributing and non-contributing structures alike. So staff at that meeting noted that this would be an inappropriate alteration. It would interrupt the rhythm of the street setbacks, and it would remove the property's contributing status, as it would not be meeting the requirements for a reconstruction or a compatible addition under national or local guidelines. So the Hrpb at that July meeting continued the project to our September meeting and gave instructions to the applicant that they should meet with staff and prepare alternate proposals for an addition to be discussed at that meeting. So we did have a meeting with the applicant on August 4th. The applicant met with Aaron Yen and our director, William. At that meeting, we didn't have any designs to review, so we basically rediscussed the need for an alternative design for this proposed addition. And that's why we're here as a conceptual review at this meeting. So we didn't have, you know, time or the ability to do a full staff review for you all to make a motion on something. So that's why we're here for a conceptual idea. And there is the possibility that parts of this could be resolved with an administrative review as well. So guidelines for new additions. This is kind of setting the framework for how you all are meant to make your decisions on additions in historic structures. So they should be designed and constructed so that the character defining features, those are those essential elements of the building and the style, aren't radically changed, obscured, damaged, or destroyed. So some of our main principles: maintaining those character defining features, minimizing the alterations, using a compatible design, size, and scale. So a lot of times we talk about not having a huge addition eat a little baby house visually. We differentiate the old from the new so people can see what the historic structure was and what we've added, but we still want to keep that visual emphasis on the historic house. We want that to be what people's eyes are drawn to, not an addition. So this is just a screenshot straight from our design guidelines. It's got a full few pages of recommended and not recommended methods for additions. And this also has a really great little visual of, you know, how we can do appropriate additions, you know, expanding out, if we're doing, you know, increased height, kind of pushing it to the back so there's less visual impact. Inappropriate things like throwing on a whole nother story. We're doing a hugely tall addition. The last thing we wanted to throw in here is that this is a masonry minimal traditional style. So hopefully you've all had a chance to look at our design guidelines. They're the biggest part of them is organized by architectural style, and they have a lot of great information about things that are appropriate for each of these unique styles. So we're going to get into this property specifically. So we've got this property here. We've got photos on the left, some of the original drawings on the right. It was built circa 1945 in that masonry minimal traditional style. It's got some of the character defining features of stucco walls, a hipped roof, and it's also got some decorative stucco banding. There have been alterations over time, as there have been to all of our historic structures. So now we're going to kind of move through the two proposals that the applicant has prepared for us. So this is proposal number one, a 2-story rear addition and a pool in the front yard. So on the left, we've got the existing site plan, a smaller 1-story house, an existing detached garage in the back. And the proposal here is to do a rear 2-story addition here. This is the floor plan for that 2nd story, and have a pool out here in the front.
And if you recall from, if you were present, the applicant's testimony at that meeting, and she can speak to that, was there's some large shade trees in the back in this rear area. To basically do the addition backwards too far would cause the removal of some of those trees.
So here's existing and proposed front and rear elevations for this option. Some of the issues that staff have kind of noted, height is a big one. This is a thing that we encounter with a lot of additions. We're trying to avoid the addition overwhelming the original structure. We also have some notes on, the window design up here, doing a paired or even triple windows would be more compatible, using a more compatible window style rather than a 1/1 single hung. So there are some things that we would like to see revised in the details of it. These are our side elevations existing and proposed with this option. So again, you can see, pretty clearly where that addition would start here. And then, of course, we did also do just a quick zoning check to make sure that things were, mostly in order. We didn't have any major zoning issues with the design here.
And this was done on preliminary data, like very conceptual. This is like, we're doing this, right? We're like, it's about right there.
So then proposal 2, same pool in the front, but doing a 1-story rear addition. So you can see it extends back a little further there. So this one has a much more minimal visual impact from the street. Since it's 1-story, you're not getting any sort of impact of that front facade. On the side, that's where you can really start to see that there's been some additions. And once again, we have some notes in terms of the proportionality of the windows and using, window designs that are a bit more compatible with the architectural style. But those are things that could be resolved, administratively at a staff level that wouldn't have to come to you to get approval. So most additions happen at a staff level. The only reason this was originally brought to the board is because it was proposing alterations to the front of the structure, which is not something staff has the authority to approve. So a rear addition, we could take it back if you guys are comfortable with a proposal.
These are the proposals, and they're not taking the front wall.
Exactly. So
Well, so we'll get to that, but these are what we asked the applicant to do. The applicant wants to do what their original design was, which was to remove the front facade, do an addition forward, and then reconstruct the front facade. Staff and the board at the time felt that that was inappropriate because it would remove the structure as a contributing structure. It does not fit in one of those categories that we talked about for historic preservation. So essentially take something that's contributing and make it non-contributing.
Right.
And so that's not something as staff that we can support. And so what we asked the applicant to do is to go back and say, okay, we know that this is not your preferred option, but go back and conceptualize maybe a couple options that you think you could live with in the alternative. So this is their alternative, but they expressed to us, at least at the last meeting, and she can speak when it's her time. You know, that their preference is to do their original design.
So both of these are,
Concept.
keep it as the contributing.
Right,
Correct.
right. And we do need to talk about the pool.
Yeah, so this one, a minor, building coverage thing, they'd need to reduce it very slightly. But again, this is conceptual. We're working with, rough drawings here. So the pool, I'll go back to the site plan real quick so y'all can see that. Pools under our zoning code are not typically allowed in between the front building line and the street, nor are they allowed in the front setback, which is the first 20 feet for this property of depth. So with this pool proposal, we understand the applicant has mentioned before, there are some large trees back here that they feel are important to preserve. And again, if they're building back, it does reduce some of the area that they could put a pool in the backyard. So how we would approach that, because
With your consensus.
Mhm,
Is the waiver.
mhm.
We would, yeah.
Well, we have a waiver process for historic preservation. Typically, the waiver process is applied directly to the historic structure. But this board has historically at times applied it to a new structure or an accessory structure. If that accessory structure facilitates the preservation of the original structure. So if you feel like the pool in the front yard might be okay as a compromise, and you would want it to come back to you, if it has to come back to you, it's not allowed. So again, we go back to what we talked about, our rules, like you cannot approve a plan that's not consistent with the code. So it has to come back with either a variance or a historic waiver. And the variance has higher or a higher threshold or a more difficult legal standard to meet. Where a historic waiver is related, as you're making a determination that this is related to the preservation of the structure.
So for the new board members, I want to clarify, a consensus is where so on this type of issue, the consensus would be where each of you kind of says whether or not you would welcome seeing that come back as a waiver. We're not asking you to take a formal vote on it as a waiver because that's not before you tonight. It's really to give us direction of whether or not you would like to see that come back as a waiver.
And both of these have advertising requirements and other things that are associated with that application. So they have to come back at a duly noticed meeting with the backup for that specific request.
I have a question too. Is that, if I recall correctly, is that on the corner of the street? Or
It's not on the corner, but it is near the corner. Yeah. Let's see. So we are, one in from the corner here.
And there's a multifamily building in the back, so I know that's why that's also was in the testimony.
Because if you look at the whole, this is like a lot of different considerations coming in to make sure that we're preserving this building.
Mhm.
And so I think a waiver would be appropriate in this situation, I would think, because you're actually doing a lot holistically in that whole property to make sure that the actual contributing structure is preserved. That's what we're doing here. Pool, whatever.
We felt the same, but we wanted to, you guys are a new board, so we thought in this case, the waiver would work based on how it's been applied previously, but we wanted to make sure that we're still okay.
Yeah, and I'm in favor of number 2, not only that we keep the structure.
Well, before we talk about the elevations, let's give the applicant a chance.
Okay.
So we just wanted to give you kind of the overall, and just so you know, the number 2 one, it's just gonna have to come down a couple more square feet in size, just a touch. It's a touch over by our calculations and building lot coverage. So it would need to just be reduced by a few square feet to get that percent down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you good with what you were hearing so far?
So what can I say?
Okay,
I
good.
was out thinking of doing something and then I find out that I could, but I can't.
Okay.
And as I always say, I think it would be really cool if realtors told you this when you're buying a house. I think it could be enforced that.
They're not all the same.
Yeah, well, and I also would have loved that they showed part of the first presentation that we brought here, because some of you saw it, but like at least 4 people didn't see it, they needed to have to leave and. Yes, sorry, I'm Elisa Prieto and I'm the owner of the property. I moved here 2 years ago and we bought this house and we also started a business. We have a business here in South District that is also going through a very long process to get permits. So I'm here in the city, sadly very often because I want to be home, I'm working. So we bought this property. The property is about 900 square feet, but the lot is quite big. That's why we bought it, thinking we could make an addition. And the reason is because, as you see, we have a baby, but we want to have another baby. And also we want to have a swimming pool. And also we are both from Spain in Europe and our parents come quite often to see the babies and we need more room because obviously with 2 rooms and 1 bathroom for children and parents and grandparents is just too much. Sorry. So,
Sorry, really quick, we can pull up your presentation from the previous meeting if you'd like to reference that.
okay, sure.
Awesome.
So, as they explained, the front part of the property has a very, very big garden. So the first proposal that we made was towards the front, and we very much respect the fact that we are in a historical district, because actually like the whole street looks beautiful and we don't want to break that. So what we were thinking of doing, and that's what I brought in the last presentation that I brought here, was to show that actually the facade has been having so many changes since the house was built. That it's not like, I understand it's contributing, but it's also true that if you see the facade, the percentage that it's original from the house that was built is minimal because the windows were changed. The door was changed. All the front part that you see with the little stones next to the door, that wasn't there in the original. Also in the original plan, and I got the blueprint from the city, there were other ornaments in the facade that are not there. And also the roof was changed. It was a tile roof and it became a shingle roof. So what we were thinking of doing was to honor this historical property when bringing it frontwards, making it go back to the original state of how it was when it was first built. So, and that means an extra cost for us, and we are not rich, otherwise we wouldn't have bought a 900 square feet house. So we were thinking even spending more money to go back to the original tile roof instead of having a shingle, which is, you know, cheaper. And like doing everything, the windows, doing them as they were originally, like turning it back to the original while respecting the zoning plans, all the zoning requirements. What they told us is we cannot do that because then it wouldn't be contributing. And my thought personally about this is contributing structure is a tool to preserve the historical look of a district. So if you're giving such a lot of importance to the tool, maybe you forget the goal, which is to keep the district looking as it was originally. And I'm trying to bring it back to how it was originally. And I'm spending extra money that I don't wish to spend on that. So besides that, all of our neighbors are super happy that we are there and that we do that. And I don't think they mentioned, but I'm sure that they got dozens, maybe hundreds of emails of support because they were talking to me. And actually, we have here part of the neighborhood supporting that. I don't know if any of them wants to talk, and I'm sure that they're going to tell you the same because they want to see young families moving there. The houses there are small, except for the houses that were made bigger before this contributing thing was there. So the problem is that people come and go because when the family grows, you cannot adapt the property to the life that you have when you have a growing family. Well, the things that I brought in the presentation are basically all the papers that demonstrate that the house was changed. It was saying changed in the 70s, then again in the 80s, then again, the last change was in 2012. Also, you almost cannot see it from the street. If you move on, you're going to see what you see from the street. And that's exactly, that's my house from the street. So actually, you're going to see it more when I do what I'm going to do, you know? So, I mean, I understand that you guys have some rules that you have to follow, but we are also really trying to do what is best for the family. And I also believe that is the best for the historical district. I truly believe that.
In my opinion, looking at what you brought in front of us, or what I saw from staff on there, I like number 2.
Oh, by the way, I also had a meeting with Mr. William.
All right.
Yes, and he proposed that if I want to do that, it's very valid if I take the house up, move it frontwards, and then build back. And I told him, great, if the city is willing to pay the money that the moving a house 15 feet frontwards costs, it's like I ordered two different quotes. The cheapest was $250,000. Pay that, I mean, and the result would look exactly, no, not exactly the same. The result would be just not looking as it was historically the house, but I mean, we made options because we agreed with you that we were gonna go through options. The second floor, which is here my first option, is not my first option. I don't want a second floor in my house. My parents are very old. They kind of go upstairs and downstairs. So it's like, okay, great, I'm gonna spend a lot of money for a house that I don't want. So second option, I mean, if you make me do that, but I would,
happy with the second option?
I mean, I would be happy with the first option, but if I.
No, I
have-
mean, you have presented two options.
No,
today.
what I mean is I would be happy with the original.
No, I know, but since we asked you to come back, you come back with option
July.
1 and 2 now. 1 is the second floor, 2 is the
Mhm.
law is.
Yeah, so there's no
which out of
second-
those 1 and 2?
The second floor, absolutely not. The
Right,
first
so
floor,
you're-
I would really ask you to please consider what we offered first. If you really say no to that, maybe we can go to that option. But then I would please ask you to fix the swimming pool thing, because I want to have a swimming pool and I don't
Yeah, I
want to
think
come
we're talking
here
about it.
every half a year.
Do the
review
variance.
for- And also,
So you all can't promise to
No, I
get,
don't-
you know, but I think
Consider-
you would consider a waiver and you've acknowledged that the process to move forward, which would be the waiver versus the variance, which has a lower threshold for review, is a simpler, easier process to meet the standards. And that's the process you've
Do you
recommended.
understand that? That we would consider a variance for the pool?
Waiver. A waiver
what?
in lieu of a variance.
I don't really understand what it means in terms of what do I have to do.
Well, it means you would be presenting the pool.
The
forward to us.
standard of evidence that you have to provide to show that you meet the criteria to achieve that are much lower. They're less stringent. So it's an easier threshold to meet.
It's an easier path.
It's an easier
I
path.
just want to know that I'm gonna be able to do it. I don't wanna.
So we're not gonna be able to tell you.
The house
Yeah.
in 2 years.
Yes.
Just here for conceptualization.
Yeah,
We're not making any finite decisions today. We're giving you kind of our opinion.
And somebody asked what I don't like about this.
I'm asking if you can have your pool, do you object to the?
I mean, what the reason why I don't like it is because it's much less private. I mean, when I have a baby, I'm gonna have, when kids are swimming in the swimming pool, I'd rather have it in the back part of the house than in the front part, because I don't feel so safe, you know, I don't think it's so private to have a pool. So I hope that if I have a pool, I can have a fence and like some plants that cover, because I don't
What
want
are
to
the
have my
rules
kids
on fence?
swimming in front of the whole
right. So you can
street.
have
It's a public street, everybody drives through there.
You could have a 4 foot.
You can have a 4-foot fence,
You can put vegetation behind.
but
the
you can put
fence.
vegetation behind or in front of the fence. So she can
You're not
have.
gonna see the house at all.
Yeah, we have several fences in front yards in historic districts for this reason.
Want privacy.
So usually when that application happens, what they do is they do a 4-foot fence at the legal front yard, and then they do a tall hedge or plantings. And it provides an opaque barrier and privacy.
And it still remains a contributing structure.
It still does. It's as long as you're, yeah, it's just the
Exactly.
plant.
So what are the
You won't be able to
philosophies
see the
here?
one That I'm proposing, but you won't be able to see that one. I mean,
So one of our thoughts with that is that vegetation is not permanent. An addition is much more permanent. You know, someone could go in and go, I don't want that hedge 50 years down the road, and the resource is still there without, alterations to the front of it.
And so when we go back, and the reason why, and we talked about this before at the meeting, is that the Secretary of Interior has issued basically guidance on what would be reconstruction, which was the method of preservation that the applicant had proposed. And the the proposal by the applicant is not consistent with that Secretary of Interior's guidance. And as a result, it would make the structure non-contributing because it's not consistent. When you're reconstructing something, you have to reconstruct it as it was before. And what we're not doing, no, because with the addition, what they're doing is they're reconstructing the facade, but that's facadism. You have to reconstruct the contributing structure as it was before. Well, they want a different structure. So really, they want a different structure. It's a slightly different mass, a different location, a different everything. So it doesn't meet the threshold of reconstruction. So we remove it from the contributing status, which is the discussion that we had at the last one.
Right,
So
that's why we have two. proposals.
number two,
Right.
the proposal for number two, if the board is interested in that and the applicant feels like that's a compromise that they can live with, then that doesn't even have to come back to you. That's a staff level approval. So the only thing that would come back, if that's the direction, is actually the historic waiver for the pool in the front yard.
I don't have an issue with that.
If she did put a pool in front. And down that area is flood. So. Does she meet that criteria elevations when she put the pool in the front yard?
Yeah, so the elevation criteria would be for the horizontal addition, not so when she has her existing structure, she would not have to raise her structure. And depends on when she pulls a permit and depends on when the new map is effective. I don't know that she's in the flood district right now, or yeah, but she's not, but her base elevation isn't as high as what the new map is proposing.
Correct.
And so if she preserves the original structure and and if maps were to change, she could come back for a base flood elevation variance by preserving the original structure and then would only have to raise the addition.
That brings me to plan number two.
There you go.
You have insurance. When people come for us, we gotta consider everything.
Sure.
And right now, windstorm, flood, it's a combination of the death sentence. So. What happened if she did all this work and she can't afford it? I mean, she can afford it, but she can't get it. What's gonna happen? Yeah.
I think if she can't get insurance, that's a greater issue to the whole neighborhood as a whole, rather than the historic preservation, ordinance. So I think the legislature has done a lot of reforms with insurance. I know there's going to be some more changes coming. I think when I lived in a flood zone east, pretty much everybody's on Citizens. Right, and probably most everybody will remain on Citizens. So I think that's probably, there are so many homes. I think.
It's mandatory, you have a mortgage.
Right, it's mandatory, but it's hard to believe that the state of Florida would allow every single coastal community with the new maps to become completely uninsurable. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. And really our neighborhoods are the least of that issue. We're talking Miami Beach. Our neighborhoods have higher elevation than Miami Beach does. So if we can't get insurance, then the entire island of Miami Beach won't get insurance. Okay, so you know what I mean? Like, I think that there's a lot of, that is a bigger issue than we can cook this particular, and we can,
I think the elevation.
Well, because of the existing historic structure, her elevation difference in the new addition is not going to be much.
I don't remember this being, I don't remember Peter flagging this as being a huge, that even her addition was a dramatic change. I think the biggest changes in base flood elevation occur east of this. But we can look it up. I mean, we can, but it's, if it's something that she needs a base flood elevation for, or something she wants to look at as a whole, then we could bring the application back if she needs a base flood elevation variance or
That would
something.
even be true for The first plan, she.
Well, sure.
Mhm.
Any addition.
Well, and that would be an issue because if she became non-contributing under the original plan, she would no longer be eligible for a base flood elevation variance.
All right, so we did our conceptual. We heard from the owner. Do we have any public comment?
You know, Bob, I've never saw a microphone I didn't like. Hey, folks, how are you doing? Can you go back to your very first slide on your presentation?
Yes.
All the way back to the first slide.
Don't know you.
Oh, hi, I'm Greg Richter, 1202 South Palm Lake. I'm president of the South Palm Park Neighborhood Association, and I'm here to support my neighbor. So what you have before you, it's a unique thing. I mean, we live in a historic district. This lot, I looked at this house, I tried to sell this house actually a couple times with a realtor, so I know it well. And what she's proposing here, and you know, it's thinking outside the box and yet keeping the historic nature of our neighborhood. By moving the facade, she can move the whole house and it'd be fine. But moving the facade, it's different and it is outside of the scope of work. But it's the one thing that makes the most sense here because I don't want to see him put a pool in the front yard. I mean, seriously, do any of you want a pool in your front yard? I mean, because by the way, when I first moved here, they proposed the same thing to me on a situation. So, and they made, a variance was made. So my point is, just saying, think outside the box. What's the best thing for this property? What is the best thing for this neighborhood? And what her original proposal is the least impactful on the neighborhood.
I think we tried to review that last time and we came to the conclusion that if we did have it that way, it would be a non-contributing, right?
Yeah, I understand their perspective for sure, and it's always the heartstrings, but you know, the reality is we have an ordinance and we have rules, and this would remove a contributing resource from what that first proposal would remove it as a contributing resource. And the purpose of the ordinance and the purpose of the rules is to not approve modifications that remove structures as contributing resource. Like, that's the whole point. So it is, and who decides when a structure is historic, and the guidelines for that is we talked about that. That's on the national level. It's on the state level. Everyone who does historic preservation for a living, who's a professional, who's an expert in this, says all the guidance that we reviewed, all the literature reviewed, if you go with number one, everybody who has a degree in this, who is a professional in this, who is employed on this on the federal and the state level says that structure will no longer be contributing. We have our feelings, and then we have what our laws say. And if we go with number one, that's a decision, and you will have to provide evidence and make documentation that you don't feel this is a contributing structure, and removing it would not make it a non-contributing structure, but it is a contributing structure in our rules. If we do number one, it will no longer be.
I don't think anybody's.
It's not an argument, it just won't be. Yeah.
Well, there's 13 criteria for contributing to structure.
Right.
And the question is, does it even meet?
We don't
I
want
don't see
to,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
we don't want to revisit last meeting
Right.
that when we did this. Right now, we were here to see two conceptual.
Right.
We saw two. Personally, I like number two, all one story. That's what the meeting is for,
This is
conceptual.
well, this is disappointing. So,
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we're here for concept.
well, I mean, I don't know if it was really that much because the poor lady sat here for 3 hours last meeting and then just sprung on, well, we don't have someone had to leave, so you didn't have
Late,
yeah, so I know, and then. Anyway,
Baby was 60 days after
So-
that series.
I don't know how much of a discussion we really did have last meeting. I was here for it. And, anyway, I'm done.
I have a question for staff, but you know, real quick, how does this, you were talking about the certified local governments and the things that are in the state of Florida, how does, talking about the situation you went through, you know, How does that affect that? Would it affect that? They look at these things? or not?
They look at all of your decisions.
Right.
And if you made a series of decisions that which you were removing or actively approving things, removing things, or it could cause, when we had a whole situation where we had to have negotiated discussions over the glass glazing with the state.
Oh, yeah. It'll just trigger more oversight. is what it would do.
They do trigger more oversight and they'll trigger more review. And then one decision, no, it depends on it depends on the evidence and what you bring up and the individual merits of the discussion. But as a rule, the point of a certified local government is not to do things to structures where in the literature would cause them to no longer be contributing. So
So are you saying in any interpretation, recreating that facade and moving it up? Automatically.
reconstruction is clearly defined of what reconstruction is. There are methods of preservation. There is, and we went through them, and reconstruction is one of them. Okay, reconstruction is reconstructing the structure. So if you don't want this to be contributing anymore, okay, and we're comfortable with that decision, and you're comfortable with it no longer being contributing, then you can support that decision. If we are keeping it contributing, it doesn't matter what we say here. An expert who would come back and resurvey that would not resurvey that as contributing. It's just not the practice.
By removing the contributing, then if the flood line elevation is well raised and everything else.
No, those are two separate issues.
Okay.
So the FEMA flood maps are a separate issue. The FEMA has adopted a new flood map, but it is not yet effective. How I don't have it in my head, how much this would impact the property with the new map or the old map, but the county is challenging the adoption of the new map.
Without saying if it stays in the green structure, the waiver is available.
The waiver is available if it stays a contributing structure for the main. It is not available if we were to approve the option one, that would take that off the books.
That's a lot higher than, hey,
So, but the waiver can help.
The waiver would not require them to
Right.
raise the original structure to, but I don't know how much that would impact, because I don't know what their current elevation is. And so we'd have to look at, they need an elevation survey. We need to look at that. We need to look at when they came in with the permit for which rules would impact them.
Yeah, we know what we need to do here. Because I'm really concerned about it too, because I mean, they've been coming and doing this for a long time. and I think-
I mean, I have heard, and you all should summarize what your direction is.
we like option two, I mean, realistically, I
I think it's coming upon us.
Even if she had to choose between the 2-story and the 1-story presented tonight, you still like the 1-story. Well, we like that one better than the 2-story. So
I think she's asking us, is there no chance she's gonna get one she wants?
Right.
So are we saying?
well, we did that.
That's
last
not what
year.
you're here
We did
for.
that last
unless you
year.
guys feel differently,
Yeah.
we're still at the same, opinion that we cannot go back to the first.
Here we go with option two with the elevation. Survey.
Well, I think if we can just do option two, what we'll do is,
No.
I don't think we need the survey. We'll deal with the survey at the permit. We can review this all concurrent with permit.
They're saying they can handle it all. The only thing we would revisit is the waiver for the pool, yes, but they can deal with
Right.
everything else.
And we can bring back the waiver for the pool next month.
Yeah. I just have a question. Yeah.
Yeah, who are you?
You have to say your name. You have to say your name.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Gina Divine, 1024 South.
You have to speak in the mic. You're a public comment.
I just want to know, like, how, if she wanted to remove it from contributing, could that happen?
We could make that decision, but that has major impacts as.
Right, and there are criteria for a review
Right,
to
we have to
remove it
prove
from
But
contributing.
because there were so many changes to this property already, I mean, could we have like somebody come in and say, oh, you know what, it's really not contributing anymore? Because it's been.
You would have to provide a study
Okay.
by a professional that it's no longer contributing, and then we would review it. And then we would also look, we have lots of structures. Simply replacing a door or replacing a window does not make a structure non-contributing, because we allow for those replacements. So all of those things are all things that are easily repairable. And anything on there that has been done to this property and what was determined also by when it was surveyed by professional and determined to be contributing. So
And this is
everything,
recently,
it was when the original survey was
So
done.
it was contributing in the original 1990s, early 2000s survey and was retained as a recommendation to continue to be contributing in the resurvey that was done between 2018 and 2020.
okay, so somebody did look at this.
Mhm.
Yes, or not. All right, that's my question.
So, and these things,
My question was.
Are you still Craig right there?
Yes. How did you forget already? No, my question was, you were talking about how the last meeting you had decided that, option one was, hang on, let me finish. How option one was not an option. You didn't have a quorum. You have a quorum tonight. You did not have a quorum last
Yeah, but
meeting.
we're just here conceptual. She's not a case in front of us.
Yeah, you're like, you're closing the door on this thing.
I have to say.
You're closing the door on this thing without a
No,
quorum.
we're here for,
That was a conceptual.
she's here for
Again,
conceptual opinion.
Both times.
so
So
I
we had,
think,
we had a forum for the things I needed to vote on and I left.
right, so.
Yeah,
So I
they
think
were both
if she would
conceptual.
like, if you would like to bring back your original option and have it voted on at the next meeting. Then we can, okay, so if you want.
Yeah,
But-
I'm not even here.
but this
Yeah,
can-
they're-
Yeah, but the
they're
consensus
conceptual.
at
They're
the
not helpful.
consensus of the conceptual at the time was that of the members who were remaining, that there was not support.
We will go with the swimming pool in front, okay, we will go with that, with the ones. But I just want to let you know that I think it's a little bit unfair because last time we were here, it's true that there wasn't a decision reached. You guys told me, let's go to the next meeting. You can also bring some conceptual designs. I did not understand at any moment, and I mean, I'm not American, but Greg is, so he probably understands better than me, that the number one option was completely gone. And you have to bear in mind that what we are trying to do is seriously the best to keep the look of the historical district. Neighbors prefer it, so now what I'm doing is not what I want, and it's not what my neighbors want. Just for the sake of something being contributing, okay, I understand, but what's the point if we are trying to keep a district historical, houses that look historical and are seen by the neighbors? You don't want them to be seen, cool, I'm gonna put a fence, nobody will see anything, the pool will be in front. I'll do it.
You are literally like at a property that gets a perfect storm of things happening here. It's the right location and, I think staff and all of us are we're trying, and we
But I'm
got.
trying. as
I
well.
know, but there's all this wind of people back here and the citizens, they watch this stuff, and what you're talking about is like this incremental thing where if you let one house go, more houses go, and the next thing you know, like the one across the street from me, it's gonna be torn down. So I mean, I think that hang in there, I know they're trying to work with you and get something that I think they'll be happy with, and I just we can hope for, so, but I don't know if that.
I agree, and that's why I'm saying we are gonna do that. But I think if everybody in the city would be doing what I'm doing, that would be good for the city. It would bring value to the city. Houses would be more valuable. It would bring development to the city. So is this bringing development or stopping development?
Guidelines,
Yeah, no, I understand, but I'm not saying that I don't understand that. at
Right,
all.
and so what she's talking about is a legislative decision. It would be the end.
beyond our.
Yes, and it would end the historic preservation as we know.
Sentences.
Okay,
Last
think
time I
we're good.
couldn't talk, this time I would like to.
Yeah, please finish your sentence.
No, I was gonna say that I just don't understand that the goal is less important than the tools that we use to make the goal happen. But okay, we are gonna go with the second option, that it's flat and it's going towards the back.
Here, do you have any additions?
No, just nothing on this.
Yeah.
No, we're good.
Anything else further, anything to tell us, any changes in rules and regs, or anything like that, much stuff, so, we're good,
We're good.
meeting adjourned.